7th of September 2023. This is one of that Let's Talk Skidmarks, and in this one I'm going to tell you a story. Now you must understand, it's pure fiction, but maybe it can make you think, because reality is stranger than fiction. This is the story of Flight ZA1994. South Africa is a Boeing 747. White flight crew and black cabin crew. 350 passengers, of which 18 was white. Remember, this is a story, and this is a very special plane. This is Flight ZA1994 on a trans-Apartheid flight. The plane reached cruise altitude and the passengers settled down for the night. All was well. Then 2 minutes past midnight, a message came through. A law was passed and affirmative action dictates that the majority must now take over control of that plane. Some passengers objected, but was quickly shut down by the majority. And the majority decided that the cabin crew must take over the cockpit. So they deployed air hostesses to the cockpit. The white flight crew objected, but vacated their seats. The plane was on autopilot in any case. 2 of the flight crew said, "Fuck this," and strapped parachutes on and left the plane. Some passengers again objected loudly, but was quickly shut down by the majority, accusing them of racism. The 3 remaining crew members settled in seats and began to read and watch the in-flight entertainment. They knew that things will go wrong and wanted to be close to the cockpit in case of an emergency. They were comfortable with the ability of the plane to cope well with these obstacles, whatever might happen, because it was well designed and contained a number of self-preservation features. There was no cabin crew, so a few passengers decided to step in. In the first class, it was fairly organized, and things were under control. They were isolated from economy class and were feeling fairly comfortable. But it was just a flimsy curtain between them and economy class. In economy class, things were chaotic. The deployed servers paid no attention to the reality of discipline, and within hours all the supplies were finished. The aisles were strewn with empty bottles, food trays and cutlery. Drunk and rowdy passengers were dancing in the aisles and disturbing the sleep of the few that did not participate in the feeding frenzy. Then a message came through. Rough weather ahead, and the pilot were instructed to change course. Well, the deployed pilot looked at the instrument panel in amazement and scratched his head. Up to now, this was a lekker flight. Comfortable seat and a great view. Now they bother him with instructions, and he was not too happy about that. Why change things while everything seems okay? He decides to ignore the instructions. Flight control sent another reminder, and Sipho decided to remove his headset. The other crew members frowned, but carried on playing on their tablets. The white retrenched pilot looked through the cabin window and frowned. From experience, he knew that around about now, they should change course due to the equatorial thunderstorms. He decided to go and check. Through the cockpit window, he saw the telltale signs of the approaching storm clouds and spoke to Sipho. Sipho stared at Johan and snapped. "Hey, Wenaboer, ek is nou in charge van die plane. Your days of white privilege is over. I'm blessed with natural intelligence and superior logic. So, hamba terug na jou seat toe." Johan's eyes narrowed and he clamped his jaw. His experienced eyes glanced over the instruments, and to his relief he noticed the approaching cloud mass is fairly small. He looked at Sipho again, noticed the absence of the seat harness, and walked back to his seat without a word. He whispered to the remaining white crew members, and they all moved through the seats in the first-class cabin. Two of the passengers got up and quickly gathered the loose items from the serving tables. They made sure all passengers were buckled up, and the crew sat down. "I guess around 10 minutes till we hit," he muttered, and checked his seatbelt again. In economy class, it was chaos. Dancing and shouting and total ignorance of the surroundings. Totally unaware of what was coming. The buzzer went off and Sipho stared at his colleagues in bewilderment. Before he could say a word, the big plane dropped like a stone. Sipho flew out of his seat, hit the cockpit roof, hung there mid-air for a moment and crashed back into his seat. There was a cut above his eye and his flying arms flipped a few switches. The other crew members were screaming in terror and the cockpit was in chaos. Cups, plates and pieces of food everywhere. The girl in the flight engineer's seat was pale yellow and vomiting in her lap. 2 more serious bounces and the plane settled down. Lots of flashing lights on the instrument panel and alarms buzzing. In the economy class section it was total chaos. People, plates, mugs and vomit flying through the cabin, and the screams of terror was deafening. As the plane settled, Johan jumped for the cockpit door. He opened and his blood chilled. Total chaos. The autopilot was trying to recover the plane and struggling. An experienced hand was needed, but Sipho was slumped in his seat and the other crew members were sobbing and vomiting. He glanced at the radar and at the flight map and walked back to the cabin. He looked at the other 2 crew members and shook his head. He raised his eyes and looked in the direction of the passengers in the first class. "I'm going. In 20 minutes or so we'll be over the ocean and then we are screwed and trapped." 6 of the passengers got up and lined up with the crew. They donned parachutes and followed Johan's lead. Yes, this is a special plane and have parachutes. One by one they dropped through the trapdoor in the kitchen section. Johan went last. As he dropped past the plane, he noticed the landing gear was out. No wonder the autopilot is struggling. Sipho must have flipped those switches in his wild tumble through the cockpit. And then the plane disappeared into the clouds. The night was dark and Johan felt a jolt as the parachute opened. Below him it was black and dark, with some flickering lights here and there. He knew they were somewhere on the edge of northern Angola. He looked around and was glad to see all 8 chutes deployed and said a silent prayer. They were not totally safe, but at least they are no longer in that flying coffin. The landing gear will chow the fuel, and he knew they will not make it. But then again, Sipho and his deployed crew cannot land that plane. He shook his head in disbelief. And that, my friends, is the end of this story. Use your own imagination and ask yourself if you think flight ZA1994 is going to land safely. I know what I think. And just use your imagination. Things are really not looking well on this flight. There is now way too many things that has gone wrong, gone out of control, or just simply broke down. And it is a massive plane which needs all of its facilities to safely land. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. And thank you for your support.